I'm so excited to talk to you about AI and SaaS, AI and implementations, and GRC in general. One reason is because you have sat on both sides of the divide. You have both sold services and you have delivered services. And I feel like most people have sat on one and then have some misleading views about what the other one is like. Obviously, there's a lot of gaps and challenges between this handoff. So I'm excited to talk to you about what it's like having experience on both sides. And then I also want to talk to you about GRC. You're an expert in GRC, you're an expert in data privacy. And so I want to understand AI is obviously speeding up implementations, but GRC is very rules based and you need to have traceability and sources and you have to be provably right, not just plausibly right. So let's jump in.
Thank you. I'm really honored to be here with you. I'm Vivek Thummala. I've been in the enterprise software industry for the last 20 plus years, primarily in professional services and customer success and client delivery side. And last 15 years, I've spent in cybersecurity, GRC, and several years in data privacy.
Perfect. Thinking about all the projects that you've worked on, what's the through line when you see succeed or implementations fail? Like, what's the thing that is consistently working or not working?
So the through line really is from two angles. So one is from the customer side, and then the other is from the SaaS company. So from a customer side, the success really is about achieving business outcomes. And it's not about that the implementation is done, but it's more about have they achieved the outcomes that they've actually wanted to achieve. And that's the fundamental success factor for them. And then the second, from a customer perspective, once you've implemented the software, it's all about change management and adoption as well. Because if the organization is not ready to adopt, regardless of what we implement at the customer side, it's not going to work. So change management is a huge part of from the customer's perspective. The organization just has to be ready for it. And then accountability, of course. So there has to be an executive sponsor from their side, from the customer side, who's actually responsible and accountable for ensuring the success of this program. And that's what makes all these implementations successful. Yeah, from the delivery side, from the SaaS company that's implementing, few things are key for success. So one is the governance aspect of it. The main thing is one is you need to have a key executive sponsor. And this sponsor from the SaaS company side needs to ensure the success of this program and project. And then a governance layer around timelines and then making sure that everything is going well. That governance layer has to be present. And then from a team perspective, there has to be a single representation from the SaaS company that's implementing. So we cannot have disconnected messages going to the customer about expectations, about goals, and about timelines and deliverables and so on and so forth. So having that one team structure with whether you're having partners or whether you're just doing in-house implementations, I think those are the key things. So these are some of the success factors. That's the through line for successful implementations.
Yeah, it sounds like there's some common threads here, right? You mentioned accountability in order to facilitate the change management. And I think that lines up nicely with the executive sponsor piece and the governance layer piece. All these things converge to eventually deliver the business outcomes that are the goal that you mentioned in the very beginning. But I want to pull on the thread of alignment between sales and delivery that you mentioned, of having this message that is consistently shared, regardless of what team you're talking to, because as we know, clients see SaaS companies as one unified company rather than just various teams or various departments. Since you've sat on both sides between sales and delivery, what's different in terms of how they see an implementation project and their incentives, and how can they best work together to make sure that they are presenting this unified messaging to clients?
So sales and delivery really are two in a box, so to speak, in a SaaS company for any kind of professional services organization. So sales really optimizes primarily for a customer vision. So basically when they speak to the customer, they talk about objectives and then they talk about achieving those. And so they optimize for the art of possible, saying that, okay, this is what we need, and then we're going to make this happen for you. Delivery, on the other side, is more about execution and what the classic scope, schedule, the triple constraint about scope, schedule, budget, timelines, all of that, feasibility, and so on. So what sales is optimizing for and what delivery is optimizing for is slightly different. So that's where some of the disconnect comes through. Because in sales calls, when the contract is getting finalized, there are some promises that are going to be made, which need to be in sync with what the delivery team is expecting as well. And that's where a lot of gaps happen in terms of sales to delivery handoffs. So I think that's super critical that the delivery needs to be a part of the late stage sales cycle for any PS, any contract, so that delivery is having a seat at the table in order to understand what exactly is being presented, expected out of the delivery, and also from the implementation. Having that very tight integration between sales and delivery is extremely critical. And the goals have to be optimized by both sales and delivery through a joint planning session.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think it is definitely valuable to have delivery in the late stages of a sales cycle, or you could use Glossa or both to help with a sales delivery handoff. Do you have an experience where sales incentives were just really not aligned with delivery incentives at some point, and you did something to help get them be better aligned or improve the partnership or really take a system that was broken and make it into a system that worked a little bit better?
So throughout my implementations, right? So one of the projects that I was working with, very large financial services institution, the SOW was signed and delivery got in pretty late in the game, in the sense that the contract was signed, everything was finalized. And as we started working through the project, the expectations from the customer kept growing. And this was not expected from our side, from the delivery side, because it wasn't in the SOW. And so, however, it was there in a lot of these conversations that the sales team had with the customer during the late stages. And so that's where, I think we need some solution, like Glaza, for example, to really come in and help in terms of setting those expectations alignment, so that we have, there are no surprises down the line as we go through. So in my situation, so we had to really work with the customer, then redo the SOW, and then restructure the contract itself. And that took a toll on the timeline and the schedule, and then even the cost and budgeting, right? So, and then we moved from a fixed bid model to a T&M model because the customer expectations are just increasing continuously. So yeah, so I think it's very important for us to tie down those requirements earlier on between when the sales and delivery happens.
That sounds like a beast of a project. I imagine that the conversation to switch from fixed to T&M and change the contract, I imagine not only did that impact, budget and timeline, but also trust and the overall customer relationship. That sounds like that was a mess.
No, it was actually. So it's a very important part of the life cycle that needs to be addressed.
Speaking of AI, obviously there are a lot of ways that you can use AI in implementations. Implementations are notoriously difficult and complex and nuanced, and AI is helpful for some things, but not everything. In your opinion, what parts of the life cycle is AI a good candidate for improving, and which parts still really need to be human? And do you see that changing in the future as AI gets better?
Yeah, so this is like the big shift that's happening in the industry, right? So AI is prevalent everywhere, and then and so professional services industry itself is actually going to be heavily impacted using AI. Where I can see AI really changing the game from a services perspective is through the entire life cycle of the project, in terms of discovery, in terms of requirements gathering, configuration, then developing the test cases, doing custom documentation, and then project status reporting, etc. And then I think all the document related grunt work, and then the gathering of the requirement and things like that, all that can be agentified, if that's even a word. So I built a model actually, which actually has several different AI solutions that can actually perform all these different tasks using separate agents. And this is a combination of using N8N for integrations, and then vector databases like VB8, and then Langsmith and LangGraph, and then Claude Anthropic for Cloud Code, and so on. Where the human is expected to come in is, one is human in the loop, because even though a lot of the work can be done, humans still need to make sure that, one, they are working with the executive stakeholders in terms of building that relationships, managing organizational politics, and then doing trade-off analysis on decisions, and then also prioritizing competing work. So these are all the things that humans still need to be involved in during the implementation of the project. And so the time to value, which is the key metric that is used in the PS world, that can be drastically reduced using AI because of the heavy lifting that's going to be done by agents, by the agentic framework. However, there's still a human element in terms of managing that people relationships part, having that empathy, and then having that judgment calls, and then having that EQ for people to engage with. So those are the kinds of skills that will remain with the humans, that humans are still expected to perform. Whereas all of this other work, right, in terms of the routine requirements gathering and demos and documentation, all of that will be completely done by AI.
And
Right?
it also reminds me of what you said in the very beginning about one of the goals of PS being not just outcomes, but also making sure that you have adoption and change management. And I think what I'm hearing from your answer is that still has to be human and that will remain human. It sounds like so much of the human work that you were describing in terms of like executive sponsorship and organizational politics and dynamics like that, that all still reads as human. But is there a future where you think that implementations are just going to be agent to agent for the majority of it? Like humans will align on the business outcomes and the goals, and they'll have like some initial set of inputs, and then agents will be able to talk to each other across the client in the SaaS org and define the project and implement the project?
So I typically I'm very optimistic about the future in terms of how much I want to push. So if I want to push all the way. So I'll go with agent to agent communication down the line, but it's several years away, right? Because we are in a very early stages of agentic behavior at this point, and there's a lot of aspects of it. So one is how SaaS transformations, right, are going to change primarily is based on one is the work that's done by AI agents today is going to be a lot of the grunt work in terms of requirements gathering and then all of that work. In the future, I do see where agents can be built at the customer side, which can talk to this agent, and then there can be an agent to agent API type of connectivity and communication, which can be established, and they can do that. But I think that's really sci-fi at this time, but I think it's coming. That's where it would evolve into down the line. It's definitely a possibility. But even today, with the agentic framework, I think 60% of the grunt work can be offloaded from humans. And so the humans are left with the 20 to 30%. That really is all about judgment, EQ, all of that. And the time to value is also significantly reduced. It used to take months to implement software products, but with this agentic framework, we can reduce it down by almost like 60 to 70%. So really what it comes down to is brass tacks in terms of what am I achieving? What are the customer objectives that we are trying to achieve? And then what is the time to value? And so
Yeah.
those organizations that can actually build out this framework, this agentic framework for implementation for saving cost and time, I think those are going to be the winners.
Yeah.
Because gone are the days where you would say like, okay, we have like an army of 10 people who are going to be gathering requirements and making all these documentations, and there are people doing test cases and UATs and so on and so forth. So all that is going to go away.
You are a GRC expert. You're an expert in cybersecurity, in data privacy. Do you think that the GRC world is seeing a change in demand for services now that time to value is so much shorter, cost is so much lower, or potentially so much shorter and lower? Do you think that that's going to change demand for GRC, or do you think that GRC is in a more unique spot because it is so rules driven and you need so much traceability and auditability?
I think GRC is like a whole world by itself, right? It's complex by design. With the new adoption of AI and with the usage of AI, the need for GRC services is only going to increase. As more and more AI gets prevalent in organizations, there is a need for AI governance. And AI governance is becoming a big topic for all organizations, all the way up to the board level. And at the board level, what's keeping the board up is that, okay, all this information is there being done by these models, but who's governing all of these, right? And then What are the data privacy issues that come up? What kind of sensitive data is being leaked through these usage of these AI models? There's a lot of aspects of AI model behavior that are coming into question. So the laws that are just coming up, like the EU AI Act and so on, they mandate very specific requirements for companies to abide by. And so more and more laws will start coming up, which will govern AI usage and behavior within enterprises. And I think that's what is going to drive the services for GRC. So it's going to change from the conventional use cases around policy, risk, compliance to what is more, how are we governing AI? And then because AI is also going to change the four use cases that are conventionally in the GRC world, which is how we write policies, how we do audits, how we do risk management, and then how we do compliance. The way we do compliance today is also very manual, right? We harmonize across all these frameworks and then we come up with the common controls and so on. All of that can be done through agents. So, which means even the work of GRC is going to be done by agents, and that requires governance. So, it's really governance about governance. So, now auditors who are coming in from the external world and then trying to certify all these companies for these compliance work, they have to think about, okay, should I trust what AI is telling me? And should I trust this company, which is actually giving me all this information using AI, and trust whether this information is accurate? So there has to be a shift in the mindset of auditors as well, in terms of how far they are willing to accept the AI generated evidence. And then from the perspective of the companies, they have to make sure that their information is airtight, that their AI models and usage and behavior is very well articulated, documented, and be able to justify. Because even if you have like 5% error, an auditor might look at it and say, okay, that's suspect. Especially in the data privacy world, for example, the legal teams that provide breach notifications to users, etc., they cannot go off of 95% accuracy. They have to go off of 100% accuracy. And can the AI provide that information? So that's one key element that needs to be addressed, because AI still give information which is very RAG and MCP based and all of that, but still, is it 100% is the key question. And some industries like the GRC industry, especially, which is very regulated, they literally need 100% accuracy. And so that's where the challenge comes in, right? How do you make AI so accurate? GRC services are just going to increase and they're going to shift from what they are today to how it's being looked at in the future.
It sounds like a really good time to be in GRC services. It sounds like a very exciting time because not only is the market going to grow tremendously as everybody needs governance for all the agents that are being built today, but also the practice itself is going to undergo a huge transformation in terms of technology, but also in terms of identity, I think. What a fun time to be in GRC implementations.
Yeah, but welcome to the party. So I mentioned about how GRC is changing in the age of AI. So in the GRC world, it's all about continuous monitoring and compliance. So earlier there used to be point in time compliance. Now continuous compliance is pretty prevalent everywhere, where companies continuously do risk management and do control testings and so on. So with the entry of AI, where that's going to change is going from preventive methods we are doing today to more of the predictive side. So AI will help based on the signals, because really AI models are built around inference, right? They infer based on vast amounts of data. So they can kind of see where it is heading based on all the signals. So the predictive component is a critical element that's going to be in GRC. And those GRC providers that can actually build on that predictive component, I think they are the ones that are going to come out way ahead. Because a lot of the other ones are table stakes at this point. Continuous compliance, continuous risk assessments, scanning and all of that. As a customer, I'd like to know what is going to be my risk posture based on all these different things that I'm doing within the organization. Like, running these 20 other projects across different marketing, sales, all of that. I want to know where my risk posture is going to be heading in the next 1 year or so, right? Based on all the data that's been happening and then all these projects and so on and so forth. So that element of prediction has to be built in into the GRC products. And that's what makes them really valuable. And that can be done using AI.
So imagine, bear with me, that you're doing a GRC implementation for a client that wants this future-facing predictive GRC tooling, for instance, so that they can see what's my risk posture going to be in the next year. Not only are you implementing this thing that is forward-looking, but also you're using agents to implement it, which are themselves governed by your forward-looking GRC that you have internally. That's very complicated, and it's all so brand new.
It is. Yeah, that's the exact point, which is that one, it's very complex. I mean, GRC by the domain itself is fairly complex. On top of that, now with AI coming in, it really helps you make risk-based decision making. So if you're a company like a pharma company or a healthcare company or a retail, you want to make decisions based on risk. And because that's really what drives the trade-off analysis. Should I take this decision or not, right? Like you're going to open a data center in a certain country or you're expanding into a certain region. Do you do it or no? So GRC helps you make those risk-based decision making, and all the other components like having the right policies in place and then also having the right set of risks identified for all the business processes, and then doing regular control testing, doing control risk assessments, and then having the right set of controls to mitigate some of those risks will help you make that risk-based decision making. All of that can be agentified, but it's complex because really there has to be a very tight integration and conversation between the agents, because it involves business process, it involves CMDB within the organization, which is by itself, it's like a whole complex enterprise software by itself for all the assets, critical assets, and then there's vulnerability scanners, and then all of that information. And then now you have all these regulations that you want to be compliant with. So those regulations like ISO and HIPAA and whatever else the company wants, the controls have to be harmonized, and then the agent has to harmonize them, then be able to look at what are the controls for each of those harmonized requirements, and then be able to address and say, okay, how do I do risk assessments for each of these, and then make sure that the risk is mitigated, and then whether the risk is acceptable or not. So if you have to orchestrate all of this, it takes a solid agentic framework to do that. And so those companies that can be AI first GRC, so those GRC companies that are AI first and native AI platforms, I think those are the ones that will really shine down the line, because they'll have more flexibility, they'll have more opportunity to be predictive versus point in time and so on. So yeah, all of the routine work that's done in policy management, risk management, compliance, and audit. In fact, even in audit, all the evidence can be automated using agents. The agent can collect all the evidence for the auditor. So today, we have to humans have to generate this, run some spreadsheets and run some SQL queries, get the data out, put it in a spreadsheet, give it to the auditor, and then the auditor manually looks at it and then finds issues. All of that can be done with agents, but it's complex. So it just has to work by having a very tight structure for agents to communicate with each other.
This is so interesting, and it's quite a different future that you're painting, where we have layers not only of pure governance in terms of having the agents do what we want them to do and communicate with each other, but also a layer of trust, so making sure that they are doing things right. But also, I'm still going back to the future-facing predictive stance of really giving them access to everything. It is a whole new world that you're describing.
It is, Alison. AI is just fundamentally changing how we do GRC.
It sounds like AI is transforming GRC as we know it. It sounds like AI is transforming professional services and delivery as we know it. Is there anything that you think AI is not transforming today?
I mean, I think it's pretty much prevalent everywhere. I think in every industry today, AI can be leveraged in some form or fashion. It's almost like our next Microsoft Word, right? Everybody has to use it and everybody uses it. So one thing is, in the PS world today, we work a lot with partners, system integrators. So these system integrators, their bread and butter is really about having an army of people who are coming in and then doing the implementations for the SaaS company. So they say, okay, we're going to implement for you, and then this is the cost. We're going to have 20 people doing all this work for you for the next 1 year. I think that is going to be fundamentally transformed, because if system integrators can actually come up, and the agentic framework that I mentioned to you earlier, if we can build that out and then be able to have a implementation engine, so to speak, which can actually do all the grunt work that I mentioned earlier. We don't need an army of 10 or 15 people spending 1 year or 8 months or say even 6 months for that matter, working with the customer to implement a project. So that's work of system integrators. The cost also is going to be fundamentally reduced, meaning like the cost of implementation. So SIs can no longer charge a huge premium and say, okay, look, we are going to have all these people do all this, right? Because those SIs that can really leverage AI agentic framework and build out that implementation engine, behind the scenes, they can really reduce time to value and show themselves as differentiators. Compared to SIs who come in and say, okay, 8 months, 20 people, there's another SI who comes in and says, 4 weeks, 3 people, we'll get it done. And it seems quite a shift, right? So 4 weeks versus like 8 months. But this SI who would have this agentic engine, implementation engine, would have a significant advantage, because they can not only deliver more projects, but they can also ensure that the customer achieves their outcomes faster. And so from the customer perspective, it's a less cost with this vendor because they're only going to be there for 4 weeks and then all of that. They don't have to pay this huge amount for these other ones. So I think SIs have to really think about how they can tap into this potential and then be able to build or leverage that engine in terms of how they can use that for the customer's advantage. And for the company, for the SaaS companies, they need to be able to build an engine themselves so that they don't need an army of people, again, like even partners for that matter, to be able to implement. They can have an implementation engine and maybe a few people in professional services to be able to like just keep running and churning out the implementations. There are some caveats, of course. One is it's complex, so agents have to make sure they're really in sync, handoffs. And then also, if an environment is extremely complex, like an enterprise client, which has so many different products inside that it needs to integrate with, then that adds an additional set of complexity. But like 80% of the SaaS companies out there can really leverage this agentic framework engine and can reduce the time to value by close to 60 to 70%.
I was talking to somebody last week that built their own AI config agent, and they said that it made the time to actually do configuration for their SaaS product, it was 7 times faster, which is a crazy number. And they're proud of it, they're promoting it. It's a big value proposition, I think, in the way that they deliver services, but it also feels like the tip of the iceberg, right? Config agent is one, but then what about data migration agent? What about
Exactly.
integration builder agent? And it just seems like these are so close on the horizon.
Yes, yes, they're all tied together. All of them can be made into agents. We just have to talk to each other.
Mm.
So it's
And
coming.
they all have to have really good requirements, right?
Absolutely. So that's why I think upstream, we need a product like Glossa to really make sure that the requirements are properly documented and in sync. And then from there, everything else flows, right?
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate the time. This was such an interesting conversation. I learned a lot about GRC, so thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Allison. Thanks for the opportunity. Great to have the conversation.